Hello everyone, thank you for having me. So, she had been walking for hours, lost in the cold and darkness of the night. The city at this hour turns into a theater of material dreams. One could quickly feel victim of their own condition, alone in the unknown, encouraged by collective narratives, where every shape, every boundary, every light or shadow, every noise can grow into a threat of danger for specific bodies. At the end of the road, about 500 meters in front of her, a gas station, a lighthouse piercing the black veil of darkness with its big green neon lights. Squinting, she made out a family of nocturnal giants, cylindrical shapes rising from behind the gas station. The factory, lost in the concrete jungle, seemed strangely to be the only other character in this timeless territory. Her body, numb with fatigue, noticed an element that she had previously overlooked: a bus stop shelter. At first sight, normal, standard, cold, standing straight on its support. Lightened by the ITM, a soft foam blending with the blue of the metal. It seems to breathe peacefully, perhaps because of the wind that had just risen. This monstrous form, like a heap of flesh, cavities, bites, arms, bumps, fat, stretch out its arm in a welcoming way. In the midst of this dripping mass, this emaciated body welcomed her. This text has been written by 5 students, Nour Keller, Valentine Robin, Ilona Roux, Myriam Safi, and Fanny Tox, in the framework of a workshop that we organized now about 2.5 years ago, together with Janus Lafontaine-Carboni, as a collaboration in between the Head Genève and EPFL. It was also part of a research project that is called Scène de Nuit, and that will be later presented today. So this small story that I've just read to you is a rewritten story of the opening scene of the movie Ghost Tropic from Bas de Vos that he realized in 2019. This opening scene shows Khadija, the main character of this movie, who is leaving her night shift, and while going home, she realized that she just missed the last bus back home. So she had to enter into this kind of journey, a pedestrian journey into the city of Brussels, where she's doing several encounters, more or less happy ones. So together with Janus, we made the hypothesis, and we proposed it to students, that by changing the framework of the movie scene, so by changing, let's say, the space in which the movie scene was being depicted, we were also tending to change the experience of Khadija at the same time. So through the act of space design, of space transformation, we, as spatial thinkers and practitioners, have the power, but in another way, also the responsibilities that go with it, to transform the space, the way that space acts on bodies. From this fiction that I just read to you, I believe that we can extract maybe 3 main ideas that I will try to discuss during the rest of this presentation. Okay. The first one is that space shaping bodies. So this first observation is inherited from our, let's say, theoretical and historical background of our discipline, where we can realize that since centuries, space design has been conducted with the idea of a normal body, of an ideal body. From Vitruve, L'Homme de Vitruve of Vitruve, Le Modular of Le Corbusier, or also Joe and Josephine of Henri Dreyfus, the idea of the ideal body has been dimensioned and really has been prescribing a specific dimension of space and of the uses that were attributed to it. So in some way, the more your own body differentiates itself from the standardized body, so the ideal bodies, the more the confrontation to the space itself can be violent or unfit in some ways. Those bodies, those ideals body, draw down gendered, age, class, racial, able, disabled characteristic of the inhabiting subject. The Western world, if we put it in another way, has been defining space production as a biopolitical system of control over bodies and subjectivity. So during this presentation, I will try to present to you different kind of methodologies to try to break, let's say, the repetition of this reproductive performance of space. The second point that we can extract from the small fiction that I read to you is regarding representation of space. The representation of space participates in the definition of its material quality, and through its representation, we can influence the narrative shaped through the experience definition of space. Paul Presado points this out in his article, let's say the built environment as a practice of biopolitical disobedience. He says, defining the built environment not as a building practice, but as a system of political representation, a set of visual and spatial regimes constructed through discourses and media practices, and the biopolitical techniques of social production and reproduction. So like I said, by acting on the reproduction of space, we are therefore also acting on the way that space shapes and acts on body. The third observation is more a methodological tool in order to enter into the project action. It's the idea that we have to look for the monstrous. By that I mean to get away from the standard, to get away from the norm, and to look for the deviant, the abnormal, and therefore the monstrous in the way that we think about space, and in that way maybe we can hope to be able to welcome various subjectivities and various bodies. This last point was the motivation of the workshop that we organized together with Lina Jaidi, my partner, around the type of furniture, the bed about 1.5 years ago during the Semaine de Tout des Possibles at HED. By studying specific iconic examples of beds, and also the subjectivities that are associated to it, we were making also the hypothesis that by changing their material qualities, we were also able to change the narrative that were going with them. To give you some examples, here students were addressing Lina Lo's bed, so a famous bed where the inhabitant is not really in control of her own experience, where it's actually the voyeur, so the person outside of the room, who has the control over her own experience. Actually, the blurred limitation in between the object and the room, and the fact that the blanket of the bed was also becoming the carpet, and let's say the finishing of the wall was quite interesting to them. And so by trying to change the material quality, but also the textures, the colors, and the aspect of this blanket, they were trying to give back the control to the owner of the bed. What I can also precise is that during those 5-day workshops, the idea is, of course, not to build a real bed, but to build a one-to-one scale narrative of the bed. So it's more about representation of the bed and what it is able to produce, let's say, as an imaginary. To give you 2 more examples that I will go over quite quickly, on the left is a reinterpretation of the Missouri bed, and students were playing with the rigidity of the grid to create a system that allowed the material condition of the bed to welcome various inhabitants and composition of kinships when going to sleep. They were inspired by Arakawa and Jin's methodology, both theory and project, where the space has the ability, so here the bed has the ability to deploy and to retract itself depending on the way that the body of an inhabitant is moving inside of it. On the right, the reinterpretation of Hugo de la Pietra bed in the Casa Telematica. So Hugo de la Pietra proposed in this project a double bed, which is actually 2 simple beds. Each of them has a TV that the owner of the bed can control. So students proposed to change the passive reception of media culture from the bed to an active production of a space narrative controlled by the inhabitant of the bed. So they were given not only a screen, but also various tools of control over the display content they were given to watch. I believe that students were also trying to address the blurred limitation in between the resting practices, or let's say the resting sphere that is offered, let's say, to the inhabitant of a bed, traditionally offered to the inhabitant of the bed, and let's say the production or reproduction sphere that is slowly entering the domestic spheres. This blurred limitation between working sphere or productive sphere and domestic spheres has been addressed to the main project that I will be presenting today. It's a design research class that I've been giving last semester for the first time, and I will be giving again this fall semester for master students of this department. It's not the exact name of the course, but in the sake of this presentation, I changed it a bit. So that is called, let's say, Carrying Domesticities. And in this class, through a design research process and with the use of fictional situations, so again, students had to choose movie scenes that were considered here as, let's say, archives or specific subjectivities. 4 groups of students had to rewrite these movie scenes and therefore to interrogate how space participates in the enactment of the social interaction they welcome. In this specific class, this topic has been addressed by focusing on reproductive labor. to give a small definition here by Alva Godby, the politic of reproductive labor, that is the work that goes into maintaining and replacing the labor force and ensuring people's well-being. So to study reproductive labor is to study care practices, practices of care for kinships, but for also the built environment, for example, as Vera mentioned earlier, the maintenance of it, to make sure that it's kept clean and healthy, but also the care for the body of loved ones or just people that we have responsibility for. And why focusing on labor practices? Because when you look at the production of domestic space in the Western world, you can easily see that its typological construction is based on the association of very specific by size and position of rooms, of living units that are actually shaped as a social diagram that has the ability to depict quite precisely the class, but also the gendered repartition of domestic uses and tasks in the household. And as we mentioned earlier, this kind of social diagrams that turns into a floor plan has the ability to shape back the bodies inhabiting it. In that sense, to focus on reproductive labor, as we're doing here, and its spaces, was for me an entry point to unravel this intertwinement in between the construction of subjectivities and bodies through space. So looking at these practices, we can see that they are privatized ones. If we can observe different examples through time, but also through geographical context, we can observe different social organizations that have collectivized certain tasks, to make them weight lighter on working bodies. But we can also see that industrialization, standardization, mass production, so therefore the effect, let's say, of capitalism on space production, has produced a duplication of serving spaces and their isolation into the home of each family or households, let's say. So what I mean by that is that basically kitchen, laundry, storage, bathroom, or toilets are not collective spaces or shared spaces, but are isolated into the domestic sphere of each household. Of course, there is a specific context where it's not happening. For example, in Switzerland, we can see that laundry spaces can be common spaces, but let's say that the general tendency of the Western world is going, has been going into this direction of privatization. Through these social diagrams, that is, like I said, building also the floor plan of inhabitation, of Western inhabitation, we can see that there is also a hierarchy drawn into these spaces. So we've been, of course, inherited this kind of differentiation in between served and serving spaces. And there has been this habit or this will to hide serving spaces. They are considered dirty, wet, unhealthy, which is a bit of a contradiction because, of course, they are at the same time the ones that are ensuring the keeping and the maintaining of public health. And by hiding those spaces, we are also collectively, let's say, producing an invisibilization of working bodies and more specifically of caregivers' bodies in the household. What I mean by that is that it's a built invisibilization of these specific bodies. So in this class, the main topic can be summed up through this quote, again, of Paul Preciado from the same text that I've mentioned earlier regarding representation, where he said that the issue is to unveil how the built environment contributes to the production of gender, racial, sexual, and disabled subjectivities as the effects of a set of specializing power, capital, knowledge techniques. So again, that space, is a set of techniques that we have, let's say, the power to change, and therefore the power to change the way that they perpetrate discriminations. So to go a bit more precisely into the methodological approach of the design research, first we proposed to students to first choose an action and not a space, and by that the importance, I believe, was that to differentiate a space from an action, so basically to be able to say that we can cook outside of a kitchen or do the laundry in the park, in the street, etc., to open for the possibility for other spaces. So the students of this class chose to address topics of the action of to cook, to do the laundry, to clean, and to nurse. Then they were asked to choose a movie scene. The importance, so maybe I can elaborate a bit on that since I've been talking about it since the beginning of the presentation. For me, the point of choosing a movie scene and not just create a new narration, it's a way to find some kind of legitimacy to address various subjectivities. For example, me, myself, as a white, straight woman, it can be complicated to address various subjectivity and to pretend knowing how other type of bodies or subjectivity can be feeling in the same space as I am. So to focus only on a very specific fiction in the very specific context of the movie scene is a way to develop a principle of empathy, let's say, toward other subjectivities, other bodies, and to address other spaces, to try to invent other spaces through that. Then, choosing the movie scene, students had to carefully analyze the context of this movie scene, so basically the spatial context of the movie scene. So, of course, addressing historical heritage of it, but also social context, etc., to draw down the spatial context of this scene. Then I asked them to textually rewrite this movie scene, and for that, they were helped by the use of theoretical texts extracted from gender, but also queer, crip, and post-colonial theories. And the use of that was for them to be able to point out maybe 2 or 3 very specific points that were, for them, problematics in the movie scene and that they wanted to change through the transformation of space. So once they done that, the textual rewriting of the scene became in some way the program of the space that they were then designing. So yes, coming from that, they had to spatially rewrite the scene. So by that, of course, it's the design process of the project, and so to address the specificity that they highlight during the spatial rewriting of the scene into spatial dispositives. Then there was a big importance given into the construction of the image, the representation of this space, of this specific space that they were narrating. By that, they had to choose in between following the position, the standpoint of the filmmaker, or to dissociate themselves from it. So the point was for them not to be completely a stranger, let's say, to the movie scene, but to really own their own position and to really explain it in some way. So for that, I asked them to build a model, but the model was not an autonomous object in any way, but a tool to tell a story, once again. So to define, the model was only built to be able to be photographed in one specific point of view that they had to predefine. So to give you maybe 2 examples of the project that came out of this methodology, first, the reinterpretation of one scene of the movie Parasite. Students were Giada Petenati, David Roder, and Celia Tourette. And through this project, they wanted to interrogate the social repartition and discriminations enacted in the home, the main home of this movie, where most of the scenes are actually being developed. So in this scene, 3 families from various social classes are being depicted. The family of the owner, the owners of the house, which belong to the upper class, and 2 families of workers, one currently working for them and the other one slowly becoming prisoner of the home. So in this movie, what was interesting for them, and for me as well, was that the movie was acting as a own character of the movie, of the scenario. The house was acting as a silent ally of the inhabiting family, as an illusion of class transfer for the first serving family, and as a prison for the previous servant family. So in the scene that they chose to address, the workers' family have been, let's say, living for a few hours in the living room without the consent of the owners. And the owners call and they say that they are coming back, so they have to clean super quickly and in a very efficient way the mess that they put in the living room. So in that sense, it's what we were discussing earlier. They have to make their presence and their body disappear completely from the space and from the scenery. So students, to do that, they studied the ornamental codes of the home in order to thwart their performativity by adding them functions. So they used the decorative library to dissimulate helping infrastructures for reproductive labor. Basically, they built a trompe-l'œil of a bourgeois dispositif from this useless, let's say, library, which acts in the film as a vitrine. And they used it to dissimulate tools of labor that have the ability to be performed without the owner of the house knowing. So they developed this project into in a sequence of 3 photographs. So first, let's say the photograph of the mess that they put, then the photograph of the cleaning process when, as they put it, at the time, an army of vacuum were coming out of the library, being able to clean very efficiently the scene and then going back. So as workers and as a caregiver, let's say, of the home, they have been given, let's say, the power of space during this scene, since their extremely precise knowledges of the house allowed them to, in some way, yes, control the aspect of the narrative that goes with them. And then, so the third image of the sequence is the back to normal, let's say, state of the living room, where all the family and the mess that they put disappeared. A second project that I can briefly explain is the one done by Sawako Bolch, Navya Balakrishnan, Frida Lo, Sofia Tapia, and Sofia Tapia Bukeli. The student chose a scene from Roma, a movie from Alfonso Cuarón. In the scene that they chose, Clio, the main character, is the caregiver of the family. She's the native inhabitant of Mexico and an employee of the bourgeois family of the filmmaker Alfonso Cuarón, who is depicted in this movie as a child. In the scene, she's doing the laundry in this typical bourgeois house of the Roma neighborhood in Mexico, where the roof is dedicated to the laundry of the house, or everything that is happening in the house. So this is a very specific, let's say, typological space, since it has separated passages to access to it, so separate access. There is absolutely no ornamental element that put in space, only functional one. The floor, for example, has a very specific morphology that is only here to evacuate water, the suspension are here only to dry clothes, and the platform that are making, let's say, making the morphology of the space only here to create walking stations. In the scene, this space is also becoming an unofficial playground for children, which means that Clio, the main character, has, let's say, the responsibility of both doing the work that she's hired to do, but also to care and to make sure that children stay safe. In the project that they decided to develop, they wanted to create new openings and passages to create links and interdependencies with the other rooftops of the neighborhood. So basically, they were creating an upper-level territory of domestic labor and proposing to collectivize the work, but also creating social moments away from their employer spaces, and that they were able to share it with other workers of the other home of the neighborhood. As a space strategy, they decided to create simple joint systems, so minor architecture, in order to make the act, let's say, of creation of space quite disappear, of conception of space disappear, only being able to, let's say, to leave the place to the social interaction it was able to create. So they wanted it to be unremarkable but efficient architecture of social interaction. So in both of these projects, students chose the position of, let's say, going along with the standpoint of the filmmaker. So they wanted the project and their project to disappear, let's say, again, for the sake of the social interaction they were creating. It could have been in a different way, but the narrative that they were building through the construction of this image was to put, let's say, the main character of the care workers, to give to the care workers the main character situation of those narratives. And maybe building upon the importance of representation of domesticities and the way they influence our built environment as a conclusion of this presentation, but also as an opening, the last project that I will be briefly presenting today is a research project initiated by Javier Fernandez Contreras about the spaces of social media. Javier invited me to join him on this research, where I propose to focus on Instagram for a small part of the research anyhow, and the representation of domesticity in this social media. So why domestic space? Because while focusing on the 10 most followed accounts on Instagram, the way for the celebrities to build their public character is to stage the intimacy. And to do that, they stage it in a topos, in what is supposed to be their intimate spaces, the intimate spaces of their daily lives, their home and specifically part of their home. The first conclusion that we were able to draw is that the hierarchy of labor spaces and living spaces have been completely switched. The bathroom, the kitchen, and even the closet, once considered invisible spaces that needed to be hidden from the public eye, became, through social media, spaces of public representation of intimacy. As pointed out by Colomina or also Paul Preciado, what Hugh Geffner did with the Playboy mentioned and its representation changed profoundly the notion of domesticity and participate in reshaping the way that American homes are still being built nowadays. So the basis of transformation of this spaces representation create, of course, a dissonance with the tools of our disciplines to create and build the physical. So to pursue this reflection as a conclusion, I will just say that to focus on various kinds of representation and maybe to open to very vast territories of domestic representation could help a lot to understand how or actually everyday material environment is building our bodies. Thank you very much for your attention.